I'm stoner, I'm stoner, I'm stoner. I'm stoner, I'm stoner, I'm stoner. What? I'm stoner, I'm stoner, I'm stoner. Yeah.
Don't get fooled by phone scammers. ReversePhone.com can help you see who's behind that number. Phone fraud is at an all-time high.
2025 IRS tax forgiveness now has open enrollment. It's easy to qualify.
white man. Down here now. I am Jesus
I was
Christ,
uploading in my computer.
the second coming. Waiting for hope to resurrect me. Okay? All that gotta happen for me to be the Jesus Christ in the flesh is for hope to resurrect me. Jehovah. Don't Jehovah resurrect Christ?
and clothes, you name it, he was tossing it out the door and out the window onto the ground.
Jones choked his wife and held her over this balcony while Silva and other neighbors called 911.
He was this close to throwing her off that balcony.
A Toledo man is sitting in the Lucas County Jail tonight accused of raping and murdering his daughter. Darnell Jones Ogletree is facing life in prison for the heinous crimes, but he was violent in the decades, years, and months leading up to his daughter Kimani's death, and for the vast majority of that time avoided the bars that he's now behind. 11 investigates. Melissa Andrews has more on Jones's road to alleged murder.
He had her on this side, where that's facing us. He had her on that side right there, hanging off the balcony by her throat.
Angela Silva saw Darnell Jones unleash mayhem just a few doors down from her 4th Street home on July 29, 2019.
And all of a sudden we started hearing things going over the balcony, like TVs and clothes, you name it, he was tossing it out the door and out the window onto the ground.
Jones choked his wife and held her over this balcony while Silva and other neighbors called 911.
He was this close to throwing her off that balcony.
Harold Glander confronted Jones.
And I yelled down there to pull her back over, and he almost dropped her. So I got myself down there and I looked at him. I said, man, if you don't pull her back, I'm coming up. He goes, come on. So I didn't take no steps, and I was watching the girl. He almost let go of her.
Jones was found with a knife and pleaded no contest to domestic violence while other charges were dropped. He was sentenced to 60 days in CCNO but served no time, instead completing a substance abuse program. It's just one of many incidents in a pattern of havoc he unleashed starting at age 19, allowed by the light hand of the law. In 2011, he was cited for being intoxicated while screaming outside of his apartment, then resisting arrest. Just 3 months later, Jones and another man used a lighter and flammable liquid to set fire to this Toledo warehouse. He was charged with arson, pleading guilty to a lesser charge of attempted arson, and was sentenced to 4 years of probation. He had to complete treatment, get a job, and a GED. As a felon, he was never again allowed to have a gun. His next felony came in 2015 when he shot a gun at 807 Walnut. He pleaded no contest and was again given probation. He violated that probation in January of 2016 when he punched and broke a window at his work release program. The violence grew in 2017 when he smashed an alternator into a man's face at 18th and Monroe. The man required 20 stitches. Jones was charged with felonious assault and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge. He was notified on August 17th that he violated his probation. He was sentenced to CCNO for 6 months, but again served no time and was again given 2 years probation. In June of 2018, he was charged with disorderly conduct for being intoxicated while cursing and yelling outside his home on Star Avenue. 4 months after that, police got a call that a man was drunk and trying to break into a house at the same address. Police said Jones had glossy eyes, was slurring, and had a knife. He was charged with disorderly conduct again and a concealed weapon. He was put back on probation and sent back to treatment. Jones was cited in May of 2019 for disorderly conduct. An affidavit states he was drunk on his 4th Street porch with a machete. He was also cited for threatening to shoot in the head the officer who arrested him. Then came the choking of his wife on the balcony in July of 2019. The problems continued in August of 2022 when he was indicted by a grand jury for an incident at a daycare. He was found drunk with a crack pipe in the parking lot shooting a gun. He served several months in CCNO. That was 3 years before the murder of his daughter Kimani Lateague and his arrest in Columbus.
What trying to kill me?
Dude, show me your hands right now.
Bro.
Pull your hand out. I swear to God, pull your.
Shots fired. Shots fired. Finish in a second.
Yeah, man, don't move.
Don't move!
Having seen Jones' violent streak, his old neighbors on 4th Street aren't shocked.
I was surprised at first, and then I turned around and thought about it, and I was like, well, if he tried to kill one person, who's to say he wasn't going to do it again? But I didn't think it would be his own daughter.
They can't change their stripes. People can't change unless they want to. And I don't think he wants to.
That was Melissa Andrews reporting. Jones also served short stints in prison in 2012 and in 2022 for gun charges in Franklin and Lorain counties. In both cases, he scratched identifying information off of those guns.
whoa, be careful. You're right, you're right.
Oh no, they're just like, you just be next neutral and don't talk too much about it. Well, he's right. Like, you know, why you touch something? He's upset.
The motive is he wants to be very nice, wants to be relevant. He started an agency, nobody's known any of his photos.
He's not working anything, right?
Well, actually, the thing is, so it's a public. We have their tax records, and I actually, a buddy of mine found it, and I told it to Ron. So I was like, this is all public records. It's a nonprofit tax.
Isn't he like very offensive stuff?
What?
Very like very offensive stuff.
I don't know. Like, sent me our messages privately. I was like, hey, I haven't seen the movie. I'm not going to publicly say it. But, you know, that's that the category. It's probably fair. Yeah. But also,
Forget to the innocent.
he's a board member of SAG or someone, so financially, I don't know what he's at stake. I was like, I want to be known for my pictures. I am not a journalistic warrior, you know, or I support, you know. And then she goes like, oh, you should see this. I was like, I understand what you're saying though, but that's not my strength, too. They want artsy fartsy.
What makes the Weber family of dealerships stand strong for almost 125 years are rock.
2025 IRS tax forgiveness now has open enrollment. It's easy to qualify.
Back of the head as he was watching television. Next to Elijah in bed was Elijah's girlfriend, Kiara Hawkins. The defendant shot her once through her right ear.
A teenager killed nearly his entire family, all because he left home without permission. An Indiana jury has just convicted now 21-year-old Raymond Childs III.
You'll also see no physical evidence tying Raymond Childs III to those weapons. No fingerprints, no DNA.
He shot his brother once in the back of the head as he was watching television. Next to Elijah in bed was Elijah's girlfriend, Kiara Hawkins. The defendant shot her once through her right ear.
A teenager killed nearly his entire family, all because he left home without permission. An Indiana jury has just convicted now 21-year-old Raymond Childs III of murdering 6 people, including a pregnant woman who was nearly due to give birth amid what prosecutors allege was an argument that turned deadly. We're going to sit down with criminal defense attorney Bob Bianchi to get to the bottom of this case and look ahead to the sentencing. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. A jury deliberated for just about 3 hours before convicting 21-year-old Indiana man Raymond Childs III of 6 counts of murder in the brutal slaying of his own family members. And his conviction came months after a judge declared a mistrial the first time around, after a witness in his first trial verbally confronted him in front of the jury. So the 21-year-old, he was arrested a day after this horrific crime back in January of 2021, where he fatally shot his father, Raymond Childs Jr., his stepmother, Kazi, the couple's daughter, Rita, son, Elijah, and Elijah's 19-year-old girlfriend, Kiara Hawkins, who was pregnant. She was just about to give birth. Now, there was one lone survivor of this absolutely heinous attack, and that was Childs' 15-year-old brother, who in court documents is referenced only by the initials XC. He was shot, but he was able to flee the house and escape the gunfire. Now, according to the probable cause affidavit obtained by Law and Crime, XC told police what happened when he was rushed to the hospital. When XC was asked who shot him, he stated, Raymond Ronald Lee Childs III. And it actually gets more heartbreaking from there, because when he's asked about his parents, this is what he says. When medical staff spoke with XC about locating his parents so that they could provide further medical care, XC stated, he shot them, I think they're dead. And XC was just 15 years old. But he's not only just a lone survivor of this attack, but he is a key witness who provided firsthand information to police and prosecutors about the brutality that had occurred. We'll get back to that.
Why did Amazon send me $20,000? Because I use Amazon.
We'll get back to that in a second, but I have to address what's the lingering question here. I'm sure all of you have. Why? What could have possibly led Childs to literally execute almost his entire family? Apparently, it was due to a spat over whether he could stay the night at his girlfriend's home. Yeah, Childs actually left his family's home without permission to stay at his girlfriend's house, and according to the probable cause affidavit, it reads, JD, this is Childs' girlfriend, stated that on January 23rd, 2021, Childs III came over to her house to spend the night. While he was there, he got a phone call from his dad telling him to come home. JD stated that sometime between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. in the morning on January 24th, Childs III drove back over to the house on a white Chrysler. Childs III stated that his father had kicked him out. But we know that version of events is not true, because Childs had actually gone home to kill his family before coming back to his girlfriend's house. To be clear, she didn't know about this when he came back, but a surprising phone alert would sooner raise some suspicions for her. Why? It says, the probable cause affidavit, about 30 minutes after Childs III arrived back at JD's home, JD received an alert on her Citizens app that there had been a shooting on 36th Street. Soon after, there was another alert regarding a shooting on Adams Street, and this is where the family lived. JD asked Childs III if he knew anything about the shooting, and he said no. Now, if this isn't enough evidence so far that something terribly wrong had occurred, there's yet another suspicious situation that arises, this time when JD drives Childs to a different residence in her Chevy Impala following the sleepover. Listen to this part of the affidavit about the evidence that Childs actually left behind wrapped in a bundle of clothes. Quote, when they left, Childs III placed the clothes by his feet in JD's car. When they got to where Childs III wanted to go, he took the clothes with him. Shortly after JD pulled off, she hit the brakes and saw a magazine clip, meaning a firearm magazine clip, fly forward on the passenger's floorboard of her Impala. Detectives, they obtained a search warrant on the girlfriend's vehicle. They did indeed recover this magazine clip that you can see right there. And detectives then tracked down Childs, arrested him after taking him to their homicide office. Now, I had mentioned earlier that Childs' younger brother, 15-year-old XC, would prove to be a very vital witness. But a few days after this incident, detectives talked with him more at the hospital, and he told them the exact timeline of the shooting as he saw it from inside that home. Quote, XE told them that before the shooting, his father had asked him to put some water in a bottle, so he went to the bathroom to fill it. At that point, he heard 2 gunshots. His father got out of bed, ran to the stairs, and said, "What was that?" He then heard his sister RC say, "Raymond shot Elijah." Another gunshot went off, and he heard his dad say, "I'm sorry, Raymond, I love you." Wow. Now, XC was still inside the bathroom, makes his escape at this point, but Childs chases him outside. He even offered his older brother money to not kill him, promised he wouldn't say anything, but Childs shoots him in the leg, shoots him again in the arm. And XC was somehow able to make it into a neighbor's home until police arrived, and he was rushed to the hospital. He made a miraculous recovery despite being quite serious critical condition. And as for the firearm in this case, there were actually 2 that were used. Police were able to recover one in the basement of the family's home, and the other they were able to retrieve after they received a call from a person who actually picked up Childs after the murder. He apparently told police when Childs III got into the truck, he was armed with a Draco firearm that AV recognized as belonging to Raymond Childs Jr. AV told Childs III to give him the gun because AV had a permit to carry the firearm, and Childs III complied. This witness, known as AV, then handed that weapon over to police. And you can see it pictured there. Police were able to match some of the spent shell casings found at the scene to the weapon, and the other casings were matched to the 9mm handgun that was found in the basement. So with all that in mind, now we have a guilty verdict. I want to bring in a special guest to break all of this down. Criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor, friend of the show, Bob Bianchi. Bob, thank you so much for coming on. It's really, really good to see you. What are just your initial impressions and thoughts on a case like this?
Hey, Jesse, thanks for having me on. Love the show, love the format. Of course, always love working with you. I think that when you get to be my age and you've been doing homicide work as a trial lawyer, both as an assistant prosecutor when I first started my career, now advancing some decades later and having done it on the defense side, the thing when I was reading this that struck me was the senselessness with the murder cases that we see today. And this one is probably about as senseless a murder case than I've ever either handled or reviewed. And what I mean by that is when I was in the homicide squad when I first started out, we would kind of like case compare, and we would say, oh, this case is really crazy, or this one's got some, something interesting element to it. I know that sounds kind of macabre, but this is what you do when you're handling murder after murder after murder. But the thing was, back then, what strikes me now is that there was always something where the motive made sense. You may not agree with it, but whether it was money or drugs or gang violence or infidelity, you could put your arms around the reason why the person did the thing that they did, despite how horrific. I handled one where they poured gasoline on a pregnant woman and lit her on fire. So the murder itself is horrible, but you understood the underpinnings of it. Today, when you see something like this, it just seems to me that there's a massive desensitization.
What if recording high-quality content, editing like a pro, and
sensitization of individuals, there's no bar in terms of the conduct, and to me it's almost like an automaticity. It's like I'm angry and I'm going to lash out in as big a way as I can. And I think it's actually reflective of a social decay, a breakdown in the mores, if you will, of society, mental health issues that aren't being addressed. because it's very difficult for me as a seasoned homicide prosecutor and defense lawyer to look at the calmness of this conduct. I mean, one of the things we look at as a homicide prosecutor, because we're worried about mental health defenses coming in, like passion provocation or something that minimizes it for murder and lowers it, maybe an insanity defense, is we look at goal-oriented behavior. And that's what psychologists will look at. What was occurring just before, obviously during, and after, to see whether or not the person was acting with purpose, with intention. And you see that throughout all this. There's purpose and there's intention, but the gravity and the response to the stimuli, if you will, that is his father telling Ken sleep with his girlfriend, created the unfathomable. So that was my initial impression. Sorry for the long thing, but you read something like this, and my big thing was, as a defense lawyer, I got to get this guy over to a psychologist as quickly as possible to see if I can establish a psychiatric defense.
What struck me is these appeals to his emotion. His father saying, Raymond, I love you. His younger brother saying, please don't shoot me, don't kill me. I won't say anything. And he just continued through. It's such a chilling thing to think about anybody doing this to another human being, but doing this to your own family members, no mercy whatsoever. That's what really, is so chilling and sticks with me. I did want you to put on your prosecutor's hat for a second, because we talked about some of the evidence. What did you think were some of the strongest pieces of evidence that the prosecution had on him?
Oh, well, I guess I can answer that by looking at it as a defense lawyer. Like, as a prosecutor, what I say to myself is, and it's kind of like backwards, like, what is the defense going to do? All right, how is the defense going to try to make an argument here? And so I'm evaluating it from both perspectives. When I was looking at this case, I was thinking to myself, where is the defense going to go with this case? And as a prosecutor, I think that there's very little that I would be concerned with, because I think when you ask what is the most significant piece of evidence, I don't think there's a particular piece of evidence, but I think it gets to something that you just talked about, the chilling nature of the reaction to such a low stimuli is something that I think is the most powerful concept for the prosecutor in the case. So it's very difficult I've had cases where the person was completely mentally incapacitated, had no idea what it was that they were doing. They've got a long history of psychiatric issues. They decompensate off their medications and basically could not form an intent to kill. Here, the intent to kill is so clear. His flight afterwards is so clear. The evidence against him, the statements by his own family members begging for the money not to kill him, the statements made by the father, the girlfriend, and the evidence. The case was very, very solid. It's one of those where the defense attorney, I think, looks at it and says, listen, this is the one I brought to the dance. I got to do my best to see if the government can prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt, but I don't think the defense was under any illusion other than that this was going to be a conviction and a life sentence for this individual.
So the defense was, my understanding, faulty investigation. There was a misidentification, and that, well, if you have two guns, there were two shooters. There was something more nefarious. And I guess also the defense, I don't know this for sure, but I wonder if they also played up the fact, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, can you really believe a teenager, because he was a teenager at the time, would have gunned down his entire family in this fashion? Or does it make sense that this was, two different people that did it? So the faulty investigation, misidentification, two shooters. The jury didn't buy it, though.
Yeah, they didn't buy it. They came back with a verdict in 3 hours. So, they didn't buy it quickly. But listen, this is an argument that a defense attorney can make. I'm a big fan of defense lawyers making arguments about an investigation that was not complete. I think that this is a big problem in our country. I see it all the time. And as a former prosecutor, in fact, I'm dealing with it right now, some of the failure to properly investigate and not dot I's and cross T's. Jesse, listen, I've been at the scene. I've been there when the call comes in fresh from 911 that there's been a homicide. And I have watched people literally jump to conclusions in a heartbeat before they've gotten all of the evidence. And it's when you have this confirmation bias that starts to set in and they start getting sloppy with the investigation that things get missed. And there are many times, Jesse, that when I was in the power and I had the authority as the head prosecutor to reverse things, stop things, or do it, I would tell people to slow down. There were cases that we had where people jumped to the conclusion it was a medical event and a suicide, but yet it turned out to be a murder. And there have been times where they thought that there are many people that had no idea how close they came to having handcuffs put on them because investigators jumped to conclusions that later turned out not to be accurate. So I know that this is a big global question, but for me, a defense lawyer attacking a prosecution's sloppy investigation, not only do you do it in that case, but it benefits everyone across the country.
Let me ask you this point about, there was a challenge for the prosecution here because this was the second trial. The first one ended in a mistrial because a prosecution witness confronted Childs on the stand. In fact, one jury member even said they can't remain impartial after what had happened, so a judge had to declare a mistrial. That's nothing that a prosecutor never wants to hear that. And it feels like there's a lot of pressure for the second time around, no?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you never, as a prosecutor, want to try the same case twice. It's like that proverb that they say, a person who steps in the river never steps.
Are you drowning in payday loan debt? Have you taken out multiple payday loans and are unable to pay them back? Then
in the river never steps in the same river and is never the same person. It's true. As time goes by and as more transcripts get created and as more times witnesses are exposing themselves to cross-examination or just the sheer nature of having to re-subpoena a case and redo a case always inures to the detriment of the prosecutor. So I was always a fan of saying, I think that you may know this from coverage that we've done together on certain trials, is that I lament these prosecutors who are sloppy. That's not what we're talking about here, but in any event, cause a reversal of the case and it has to be retried again because it never gets better for the prosecution on the second round. So when you have a witness that does something that occurred here, which caused the mistrial, or I've seen in my cases juror misconduct, and you got to try it again, you take a big sigh. I mean, you go into the game, but you don't like it. You're scarred when that happens.
I want to ask you about sentencing. So he wasn't just convicted of murder, which I believe under that state law, each count can carry 40 to 65 years in prison. But he was also convicted of attempted murder. So that's, I believe, 20 to 40 years in prison, and then a misdemeanor charge for carrying a gun without a license. Will this 21-year-old ever step out of prison again?
Well, Jesse, that's a big question, too. A very good one. I don't think so. But I am watching more and more as time goes by and disagree with the idea that we have, based on quote unquote science, indicated that people under the age of 26's brains are not formed properly, and therefore we should give them a break on sentencing. And these arguments have been successful in many places. But I think the gravity of this particular offense and the number of victims screams out for an individual that serves at least the longest aspect that state allows with respect to parole and eligibility. But you can be assured at some point in time, lawyers are going to be arguing that his youth, his inability to form mature thoughts or whatever should warrant a less sentence than if this was somebody who were an adult that committed the same kind of conduct. But I think that the nature of this offense and the amount of victims is going to cause the judge to give the maximum sentence possible, and parole is likely, is likely to give him as much as they can. And look, a lot of this also depends with parole on how the family responds to this down the road. I'm going to presume, based on what I've read, that the family, especially the pregnant woman, I mean, this is bad, about as bad as you get, right? That family is very active here, and they're gonna squawk, and a lot of times the squeaky wheel gets the grease when it comes to parole here. So I think that inures to the detriment of the defendant's early release.
I was struggling with what the defense could say at sentencing, whether even the defendant makes a statement, what his attorneys would say, whether they call any family members, or friends, or I don't know who, to provide some sort of recommendation to the judge about what sentencing should be, because I also wonder whether or not the judge would just sentence this man to consecutive sentences, one after the other for each one of the victims, as opposed to concurrent, all of them together. So again, just trying to preview what we might expect there.
Right. A lot of big questions there. Now, obviously, as a defense lawyer, you want to try to bring out that although it may not be a self-defense, a legal self-defense, but that there's a mental health issue, Judge, it's apparent by the facts themselves. If you cannot understand the gravity of what he did, it's because of a mental health issue. And again, it might not rise to the level of a defense, but it can mitigate the sentence that the judge is going to give in the case. As far as consecutive sentencing or concurrent sentencing, there's always a contradiction in the law. One side says there are no such thing as free crimes, and each victim warrants a consecutive sentence. And yet, there are other areas of the law that says a single episodic event close in time where multiple crimes are committed may warrant a concurrent sentence. Based on my training and experience, the cases that I've seen, and the gravity of this case, I really find it next to impossible to believe the judge will give anything other than a consecutive sentence in this case.
By the way, Bob, you are also a certified EMT, right?
That's correct.
So what was this other aspect that about the story that I think is just incredibly harrowing is when you talk about the surviving brother, in this case, XC, that he was shot in both his leg and his arm, yet he's able to get up, go to the neighbor's home, manages to stay alive long enough to make it to a hospital, becomes a key witness in this case. Talk to me about how is that even possible?
You know, Jesse, it's a mystery. I've come on the scene of catastrophic shootings and things of that in my capacity as an emergency medical technician, where there are injuries to an individual that defy how this person is alive. And you marvel at it. And yet I've seen some situations in which a minor thing causes somebody to die. You know, when we go out on the rig, we say this all the time, and the call comes in, you never really know until you get there what you're going to be looking at. And I look at it from the standpoint of the EMTs that had to respond to an event like this, because you have to understand there had to be a massive law enforcement response and a massive EMS response. And when that happens in a mass casualty incident like this, you're going to all these different people and doing the best to triage them. And if there's individuals that you think can be saved, sometimes you have to make really catastrophic decisions that will stick with you for your life, because you may leave somebody behind that's still alive, but you don't think that they're going to be saved by the time they get to the hospital, and choose the person who's most likely to be saved. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it. It's a situation we hate to be in. But in this particular case, from a legal point of view, we marvel at it, and prosecutors are thankful that that witness is there, because that witness is a key person to the case. And as an EMT, we look at it and say, wow, another guy who suffered a shooting and actually survived. And there's a lot more than you think. In the 30 years I've been doing EMS work, more people than you can imagine get involved in shootings and are saved now than there were a couple decades ago.
That's a great thing. That's a great thing. I mean, honestly, it is just heartbreaking to think about what this, then 15-year-old had to go through, experience losing his whole family, having to survive that attack. His brother is the one who did it, and then have to testify about it, and then have to explain what happened. Look, it's a miracle he survived, but our hearts go out to him, and our hearts go out to the family members who lost these loved ones. Just such a sad case. And Raymond Childs III, he is scheduled to be sentenced on January 7th, so we'll see which way the judge goes. But Bob Bianchi, good to see you. Thank you so much for coming on. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you, Jesse. My pleasure.
All right, everybody, that's all we have for you right now here on
Man, that's some crazy work there. You can't tell me that my man crashed out over a gal, 'cause he couldn't have a sleepover, to where he executed the whole family. I'm gonna say he wanted to do that the whole time anyway. This is the ultimate case of attended D, if you ask me. No female should be worth that. Not the whole family. Not nobody in the family. It's sad. Well, folks, I don't think we'll be this I don't believe that. What am I trying to say? That the P. Diddy trial will be televised. As a matter of fact, I know it won't be. Because it's a federal case. The star witnesses are star witnesses. I think the celebrity status is what gonna keep us out of the courtroom. But I would surely like to be in there. It's had to be entertaining. Let's see here. Let's get an update from Law and Crime.
Their cases for the jury today. This was finalized, by the way, a jury that was finalized this morning. Then we heard the opening statements. I say we heard. There are no cameras in that courtroom. There's no audio in that courtroom, but there is live reporting about what has been happening. And in a few minutes, I'm going to bring on our special guest who was in that courtroom to give us the latest on what has been happening. But what we want to do also in this lunchtime hour, actually we'll probably go to at least 2 p.m. Eastern, is to take your questions about this case, about where you think this case is going to go. As we lay out what happened in opening statements, your thoughts on maybe who is winning the day so far. By the way, we have a poll up right now about whether or not Sean Combs will take the stand. Will he testify? What do you think? Took the stand in his last trial all those years ago, but it was a very different kind of case. This is a very different kind of prosecution. Two different narratives today, right? The prosecutor, Emily Johnson, essentially described Combs as a monster, stating that this jury will hear about all kinds of alleged crimes and the team who helped him commit them. The defense, Tenny Garagos, explaining that this case is about love, jealousy, money, and even acknowledging that there are episodes of domestic violence, but it's not sex trafficking, it's not racketeering. So right now I want to bring on Elizabeth Milner, law and crimes reporter, who was in that courthouse today for the opening statements, day one. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming out really quickly to talk about this. So first, I want you to set the stage. The whole scene out there, you had almost trouble getting into the courthouse today. Talk to us about what you're seeing.
Oh yeah, I crashed out a little bit this morning, Jesse, thinking I was not about to get inside that courtroom just because of just how crazy it is. I mean, you can just see the lines just going all the way back with media. It's going all the way back just with the public, just so some people can either, one, watch the trial, get a glimpse of Diddy's family members coming in and outside of the courtroom, and even as well as see as his attorneys, whose members include Brian Steele, Mark Agnifilo, Mark Garagos playing in kind of that defensive advisory type of role. So it's crazy out here, especially, you know, it's Diddy, it's high profile celebrities, it's salacious allegations. Then on top of that, he's facing a lot of time behind bars. So you can understand why so many people of the public wanted to be here and wanted to get here super early so here and wanted to get here super early so that way they could attend. I even heard somebody was standing in line and was auctioning off how much that they would give to somebody else in line for up to $500, $600. So that's just a lot of people here. Now, as far as who was inside the courtroom today, still is a lot of famous faces, or let me not say famous faces, but a lot of people that we are definitely familiar with here at Law and Crime. You have Mark Garagos in the courtroom, Karen Agnifilo, who is the wife of Mark Agnifilo, who's also representing Luigi as well too. You had Little Rod inside the courtroom today, and he's one who had filed one of the many civil claims against Diddy as well too. He came in probably, I would say, maybe a little like 8:30-ish, kind of came in with the sunglasses, 2 chains on, as well as his attorney was inside that courtroom as well too. You have all of Diddy's children, with the exception of his youngest daughter, Love, were inside that courtroom. So that includes Quincy Brown, Justin Combs, Christian Combs, Delilah Combs, Chance Combs, Jesse Combs. Chance's mother was inside that courtroom. Diddy's mother was inside that courtroom. The daughter of Diddy's youngest daughter was inside that courtroom. And then you have the twins' caregiver, who is also best friends with Kim Porter as well too. So a lot of people were inside that courtroom as well for just opening statements, just to get this jury selected, because it went down from 43 to 18 today. And so a lot of people were inside that courtroom. It was body to body, and what can you expect? It's Diddy's first day of trial, so this was, you know, just a little bit of what we were expecting today, but it's crazy out here.
And I will encourage everybody to check out what you're posting on X, Twitter. Because earlier today you actually posted that you saw Rodney Little Rod Jones, one of the first people to sue Sean Combs. He was outside the courthouse. We were always expecting who would end up showing up during the course of this trial. Talk to us about the jury. Who is this jury? What can you tell about how they're reacting so far to opening statements? I mean, NBC has reported you have one juror who's a 69-year-old male, another juror who's a 31-year-old male, another one 51-year-old male. You have a 42-year-old female, and they have different numbers to them. But what are you determining based on the jury? What's the makeup, and how are they positioning? How are they reacting to the opening statement so far?
Yeah, well, kind of a hard question to answer, I should say, just because of where I was sitting inside the gallery. It was really hard to kind of see each and every single one of their faces when both sides were presenting opening statements. But what I did see from being inside that gallery was some people jotting notes, some people just very much intently listening to both Emily Johnson for the prosecution as well as Tony Garagos for the defense. But as far as the makeup goes, I kind of just took their jury numbers and compared them to the notes that I took last week when I was here for jury selection. You have one who's a scientist, one whose brother is a security guard. He knew Diddy was arrested but didn't know the charges. You have one person who's part of a union job. He works for the Department of Corrections. Another person who is now retired but previously used to work at Verizon. You had another person whose friend is a detective, son is a security guard. But you know, as far as the defense was kind of making their objections today as far as jury selection goes, and you know, just kind of the objections they made that, you know, the government was striking 7 black jurors, that type of thing. There were still black jurors that are going to be serving on this panel who are going to be making making the decisions going into those deliberations. So from what I saw of the jury makeup as a whole, it really was a diverse group of men and women of all different ages, all different walks of life as well too.
So we hear some commentary in the back right there. Obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of commentary when it comes to this case. But Elizabeth, you know, we counted up right now. I believe we, as we're looking into this, we're counting up how many men there are. I believe there's 8 men, 4 women on this jury, all different ages. None of them younger than 30 years old. Take that for what it is. A little bit of older individuals as well. But I think it's really interesting when you talk about what we saw today with opening statements, right? And by the way, just to reiterate something that you mentioned before, the first argument we heard from the defense today was saying that the prosecution, they raised what's called a Batson challenge to their preemptory challenges, saying you're striking jurors based on race, which is improper. The judge didn't side with it. They got a jury selected. Talk about opening statements. I want to start with the prosecution, Emily Johnson. What was the main theme of today, and did you learn something new? And Elizabeth, you're going to have to talk a little bit louder because that guy behind you is incredibly loud. So what was the theme of Emily Johnson's opening statement, and did you learn anything new? Anybody that might testify?
Yeah, so, obviously we've been following this case from the beginning, from the time that Cassie had first dropped her civil lawsuits against Diddy. And so a lot of this stuff that we were listening to from Emily Johnson was expected, right? She starts off with saying, this is Sean Combs. He's a cultural icon, a businessman. He's larger than life. But then she went and kind of talked about the defendant's crimes, the defendant being Diddy, that went past 20 years, kidnapping, allegations of arson, allegations of drug trafficking, sex crimes, obstruction. They were talking about one specific night where the defendant was on the hunt for girlfriend Cassie. So I was pretty surprised there that they just went out of the gates and already had just named her. I was assuming when she were going to be taking the stand, that's when the jurors would know her name, and that's when she would be introduced as, alleged victim number one. But the government came out and just automatically just named her. They talked about the incident where Diddy found out Cassie was seeing another man, and that Diddy took his gun and his bodyguard, and Diddy threatened to allegedly kill this man that Cassie was with. Emily Johnson talked about how he had beat Cassie so brutally that he also had to take control of her. He kept videos of Cassie sleeping with escorts and threatened to use them against her. These are the types of things we had already known and were already kind of painted out inside those indictments that the government had written up, and that type of sort. Diddy referring himself as a king, which is kind of ironic because he has a giant king crown on the back of his neck. Emily Johnson spoke about the defendant using his inner circle to manipulate women that for a while he watched, how his bodyguards kind of played, or bodyguards as well as employees kind of played a role into this alleged RICO conspiracy as well too. And she made it a point to say this case is not about a celebrity's private sex preferences, because that was something that the defense definitely kind of chalked it up to being just, that he lived an alternative lifestyle, that type of sort, and we'll talk about that more in a second. While there has been a lot of reports about victim 3 and where her whereabouts are or anything like that, the defense didn't talk about alleged victim number 3. Instead, they kept it pretty short and to the point. They talked about Cassie, they talked about Jane, who we presume to be the other alleged victim in this case. The government was talking about, the freak-offs being also named Wild King Night, something that we had also known about, as well as even just simply as, hotel nights as well, too. Allegations of flying escorts across state lines, out of the country, into the country, that type of thing, that Diddy had demands to for the staff to set up his rooms in advance, lighting, lube, cash for escorts, drugs for both Diddy and the women that were participating in these types of events. Women had to dress in lingerie, had to wear white nails, tall heels, something that Cassie had pointed out in her civil lawsuit that was later settled. Talking about the drug use. Then they went into kind of, the allegations specifically geared towards Cassie and just how, the defendant had met Cassie. They had a 17-year age difference. Cassie was initially given a 10-album deal, and obviously that never happened as far as putting out a whole bunch of different albums and that type of sort. And so these were types of things that we had already known about. I think some of the more interesting points also go to Jane, as far as the other alleged victim. She was a single mom. She met Diddy around 2020 when Diddy was single, when Jane was single, but Diddy was seeing other people. Diddy introduced Jane to the freak-offs, and she had tried one just to kind of make him happy, and then just kind of kept going into this repetitive cycle of doing these freak-offs, wild hotel nights, that type of sort, just to kind of appease him, that Jane didn't want to do these freak-offs, and that she had tried at even one point to hire men on her own that worked in the porn industry so she could pick the men. Diddy made her, these escorts not wear condoms when they, allegedly participated in these types of activities. So these were just kind of the big things that were pointed out as far as the government. And Jesse, do you want me to go into the defense? Because the defense was pretty interesting as well, too.
Before you go into the defense, as I was reading about the reporting today, it was the first confirmation that Cassandra Ventura is victim 1 in this case. We always guessed it, we always surmised it, now we have a definitive answer. And by the way, I think it was either the prosecution or the defense who mentioned that she's going to probably testify this week as we wonder who the first witnesses are going to be. And also this reference to Mia, who is Sean Combs' personal assistant, that is maybe going to provide some important testimony in this case. Now, before we go to the defense, real quick, as though you're looking at all these people that are behind you right now, Elizabeth, are these all reporters? Are these all fans? Are these all people who are supporting Sean Combs, who are not supporting Sean Combs? Are these just interested spectators? I'm trying to get a sense of the people that are walking behind you right now.
Yeah, so obviously I was trying not to pay attention so much because it's really so many people, but it's really just kind of a common mix. It's a lot of people who are here with the media. You know, you have field producers, you have social media producers, you know, and pretty much every outlet across the country is here right now inside that courtroom. I wouldn't say there's too many supporters beyond that one guy just kind of yelling, and he had been kind of saying some pretty vile things to us as reporters. So, you know, we're trying too much not to pay attention to him as much as possible. As far as the family goes, you know, right before we did this hit, we saw the family kind of get into a Sprinter van and kind of drive off, maybe to get something to eat, maybe to decompress, because, you know, think about it, Jesse, his children were inside that courtroom, especially his daughters were inside that courtroom, hearing about their father, you know, booking escorts and allegedly beating women and that type of sort. So maybe it was just the time that all the family members just had to get out of here, get away from this media circus. But for the most part, it's a good mix of both media and just the general public who are just genuinely curious.
So Elizabeth, I know you have to jump back into that courtroom because they're going to start up in about 15 minutes. Real quick, if you could summarize the defense's opening statement, some highlights there.
Yeah, the defense's opening statements were pretty, we were kind of expecting them. They were going to have to admit that Diddy had been physically violent towards women in the past. They were going to have to admit that Diddy had this type of temper, that, you know, he participated in taking these types of drugs, and that his temper was especially bad whenever he was on drugs and alcohol. You know, there was a point in the openings where Diddy stood up when Tenny Garagos was introducing him to the jury. For the most part, even throughout opening statements, he kind of sat there calmly. He looked at the jurors. He looked at Tenny Garagos, who again provided the opening statements on the defense's behalf. You know, the defense was kind of harping on the fact that the government has no place in his bedroom, something that we had talked about many of times. Just how they're kind of painting this as somebody, you know, who did bad things on one hand, but were these bad things criminal? And that was essentially what the defense's argument was there. You know, they said that the defense will see domestic violence in this trial, but you know, while they do take it seriously, they say it's not sex trafficking. So I feel like they're trying to divide this line between, you know, this being a domestic violence spat or domestic violence toxic relationship type of thing, as opposed to these being actual criminal acts that Diddy was allegedly committing and that type of thing. You know, the defense was saying that these alleged victims were strong, capable women, that they made choices that were for adults, they were free of choice, and they came with both pros and cons, and that type of thing. And then they were kind of talking a lot about how Diddy was jealous and how, you know, other partners or his other relationship partners. So, for example, Cassie. They also mentioned Gina, somebody I had talked about in some stories I had done. She had talked about how Diddy was physically violent with her in a podcast episode, for example. And so that was kind of her mention there beyond, you know, what the government was talking about as far as you know, alleged victims in this case and that type of sort. They had mentioned Kim Porter and how Cassie was jealous of Kim Porter's relationship with Diddy and that type of thing. And then everything kind of ended as soon as Kim Porter had passed away. Cassie went to her memorial service, and that was the last time she had seen Diddy, even prior to her expectation that she'll be inside that courtroom testifying. You know, these jurors are going to see some of these freak off videos, but they say that it was taken from Cassie's devices, not Diddy's devices. And so, you know, they talked about Mia, for example, who had worked with Diddy for a number of years, and the defense says, you know, they want jurors to evaluate her motive to testify. When they were talking about Jane Doe, it was the same thing, that this was a jealous relationship. Jane wanted to be more public, whereas Diddy, you know, he flaunted other relationships that weren't with Jane and that type of thing. So those were some of the biggest takeaways from the defense's openings, as well as the government's openings as well, too.
These are the arguments we anticipated. Now, obviously, there's a lot more detail to it. We're hearing it in an official capacity. And these jurors, while they might have heard certain aspects of this case, this is the first time, presumably, both arguments are being positioned to them for the first time in such a very particular way. And this is opening statements. It's not evidence, but it is the start, the official start of Sean Combs' criminal trial. Elizabeth Milner, thank you so much for reporting. Go back into that courthouse. Stay safe out there. There's a lot of interesting characters you're seeing running around. But thanks, Elizabeth. Appreciate it. Okay, so here's the deal. We have another hour. We're going to be taking your questions right now on everything that happened today and everything in this case. I mentioned we had that poll about will Diddy testify. You want to know what the results are right now? 60% of you say no, 40% of you say yes. Now we know.
Man, this is crazy, crazy, crazy work. Man, I'd love to be in that courtroom though, cause this got to be very entertaining. Well, we're gonna try to stay updated on this situation here, and I'm gonna try to stay with keep posts. I don't know how we gonna. Well, we just gotta I'm gonna come through with updates. We will be following this Diddy case, cause I do want to know the outcome. Anyway, y'all, this is where I'm gonna get out of here. I appreciate you for rocking with me over here at Fly High Productions. I am Mr. Follower, and I'm out. Squad up.